Hello and welcome to our second screening of the term. I'm Gina Clark, a sixth form student at both Larkmead and John Mason School. I'm also a member of the Abingdon Film Academy. Tonight we have 5 new films to show you, 4 by our sixth form members of the film unit and 1 by a member from the Film Academy, which is the partnership wing of the AFU and offers students at Fitzharris, Larkmead and John Mason schools the chance to make films with guidance from the AFU's wonderful tutors. If you saw our previous screening, you'll know the filmmakers introduced their film here in the Amy Theatre. This time, however, all bar one of the filmmakers are now at university. So you'll be meeting them from their separate bedsits in London, York and Liverpool. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to hand over to Henry Muller, who joins us from Royal Holloway in London to introduce his film.
Hello, thank you very much for coming to watch this film, Living with ADHD, and the other films on show tonight. This film came about when I was diagnosed with ADHD at the beginning of my 6th year in 2018, and myself and Jess decided to make a film about it. And we started off very well in upper 6th, however A-levels came about and we had to stop production. However, as we moved into my gap year and just went to university, the film was still there and we still wanted to finish it. So we tried to carry on. However, when we reached the end of my gap year and Jess's first year, still wasn't finished. So we decided to carry on. And as my first year of university approached and Jess's second, it still wasn't done. And it was at this point the film took a bit of a turn as we kind of embraced the metaphor of the fact that I couldn't finish my film. I had a great idea. We had a great idea at the beginning, and we still couldn't quite get the touches on it. So I hope you enjoy what is basically one big metaphor. I'd like to say thank you so much to the film unit, all the staff on it. They could have just written it off, but they were amazing and helped us finish. Also, thank you to Emma Ferguson, who's in this film, who just knew so much about it and was so great. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy.
ADHD is a neurodevelopmental disorder, which means that it's something that has a significant genetic contribution, and young people have it all through their lives.
Hello, I'm Henry, and I've been trying to make this film for 2 years now. How can a clock be that loud?
It's something where we see a pattern of hyperactivity, so they're young people who move a lot more than others, poor concentration, it's much harder for them to focus on what they're doing, and impulsivity, so they rush into things without thinking.
Update, it's been 2 months and I still haven't made anything.
At school, you're trying to study, it makes it much harder for you to sit still, your body's moving all the time. As young people get older, it becomes less, so at primary school kids are jumping out of their chair, rushing around. As they get older, it might just be more an experience of internal restlessness, and so they might be the person whose legs always going like that in their chair. It's much harder for them to focus on what they're expected to and maintain their concentration, so they might manage for 5-10 minutes, but then their mind's wandering or it looks from the outside sometimes as if they're daydreaming. Actually, their head's just not on what's being asked of them. So they might get told off for daydreaming or not concentrating, and it's because it's difficult for them to keep on task. And that's where making the diagnosis can be really helpful.
And I got to lower sixth and things started to get a bit harder, and I fell behind from about week 2, which at the time, you know, I didn't like it, but I thought, you know, typical what I am, I just thought, you know, it's 2 years away, that's future me's problem. Suddenly the term ADHD started to be banded around, and suddenly they were telling me that everything that I liked about myself, you know, the kind of creative zingy side of me and the bit out there, was a disability.
So stimulant medication, it's in the same family as coffee or nicotine.
I was on 8-hour methylphenidate, sciencey word, and that was to be taken in school every day, and it would make me focus. It's like having a motor in you, and kind of that energy that drives you through every day was turned off. And yes, I could focus on my work, and I could focus on the things that, you know, fitted the exam system, but everything else got just deadened.
Like all drugs, it has side effects, so that's something that you have to think about carefully with your doctor and monitor.
But my personal ones, you know, were I had no appetite, just didn't eat.
It can sometimes make young people a bit sad and quiet, so we have to watch for that.
I was miserable for a year. The best year, what was meant to be the most exciting, best year, at school was completely tainted.
There's very good evidence that in schools where teachers understand ADHD and understand how to support young people with ADHD, that makes a significant difference, and a lot of kids don't need medication who would otherwise.
So in conclusion, I truly believe that life off of meds, being your true self, leads to a happier life. And I think taking drugs to fit a system that doesn't fit you, I think the system is the problem, not the people.
Good evening, everyone. I'm David.
And I'm Jack.
We're proud to present our last film together with the AFU, entitled A Dying Breed.
In A Dying Breed, we tried to explore and document the web life that we felt was diminishing in today's society, through the lens of John Corton, a falconer and estate manager.
What we envisaged would be a film about falconry and rural life, quickly developed into a wider investigation into the world we live in today.
We'd like to thank John for his contribution to the film and for being so generous with his time.
And also the Abingdon Film Unit, who have given, on this project and all of our others, such an amazing amount of time, support and invaluable expertise.
Especially, we would like to thank Mads Juncker for his help with everything on this film, from cinematography to editing. We could not have done it without him.
Lastly, we would like to thank Mr. Taylor for his persistent and tireless dedication to not only our films, but those of the AFU and AFA.
We hope you enjoy.
No disrespect to people that live in towns, but they are the people that live in towns. They believe what they read, they believe what they're shown, they don't experience it firsthand.
Years and years ago, there was a film with Tony Curtis and Kirk Douglas called The Vikings. And Tony Curtis had a hawk that I saw fly and catch an animal, or a bird, a duck. And I thought, yeah, I fancy that. And I think I was about 8 or 9 then. So it started at that age. Somebody gave me an injured tawny owl when I was about 10 or 11, which I had for a few years. And I paid £40 for my first hawk. And I had that first bird for 34 years. So it was a little bit more than a 3-week wonder. And it's always been a passion, and they accept it now. Falconry, by definition, is hunting natural wild quarry with a trained bird of prey. It's an escapism. It lets you get away. The places you go, and once you're out with the hawk, you are totally focused on the hawk. Tom, he was a this year's hatch bird. He was hatched on June the 8th. He was a little downy ball of fluff for a while, but they very quickly developed.
Training wise, he's just finished nursery school and starting primary school. A bird that I've had 2 or 3 years, yeah, I pretty much know what it's going to do before it does.
I have got to be somebody that he wants to come back to. So he's got to be dead comfortable with me. I'm basically at this stage his dad. So if something's not going quite right, Dad, help me. Depending on your standing in the community, you were allocated a hawk. They were actually providers of food. If you were an emperor, you got an eagle. If you were a king, you would get a gerfalcon. If you were a duke or an earl, you'd get a peregrine. I fly goshawks, so I would have been nominated as the yeoman of the guard. You can't put the bird away and forget about it for a week. It's all day, every week of the year. You know, people will come and look after them when I go away, but it's not something that you can enter into lightly. It isn't rocket science, but you have to be committed. You have to be patient, and this is what I'm against some of the modern things with sort of, you know, youth of today. When they sit in front of a Xbox or whatever it is, it's instant, semi-violent hyperaction. And I actually think it wires their brains to think that way. Then real life is slow and boring. If you tried to get somebody that sat playing their Xbox for several hours to come and say, now spend that amount of time training a hawk, the progress they would make in those few hours would not satisfy, if you like, their emotional, mental needs after they've been used to the Xbox. It's a totally different scenario, and it's the reason why I would say I would never push anybody to do it. They've got to want to do it. If they'd sooner play an Xbox, leave them playing it if that's what they want to do. That's not my choice. So, you know, I'm against it, but that's me. I'm old. You have to work on positive reinforcement rather than negative reinforcement. Positive reinforcement is it does something you encourage it to do and get a reward. If it does something that it did and then you have to negatively reprimand it, it's not good. So I do think with the children, you try to, you know, the phrase is you use the carrot, not the stick for the donkey. You know, you lead them to do what you hopefully think is right and what they want to do, rather than forcing them to do something and reprimand when it doesn't happen. You can get, you know, a certain type of bird for £150. They can go out and get a bird, they have no idea what they're doing. They saw this guy just take it out, let it go, it flew off and it came back. And that's what they go and do. Or they go and fly it in a public park where somebody's walking their little dog. Now a little Chihuahua or miniature Dachshund could look very much like a rabbit. There is that instinct in a bird, and there have been accidents happen. Yes, the birds hopefully will kill. But what they kill is our food. Do they have no conscience of going to Tesco's, Waitrose or the Co-op and buying a chicken? It didn't jump on the shelf itself. It was grown, reared and killed. But it had a one-way ticket. It was always going to be grown, reared and killed and end up on the shelf.
And unless, you come out and you actually see what does go on, you will get a better picture. So from the falconry sport perspective, the falconry shows that you see through the summer months, they are to try and make the public aware that what we do isn't, a bloodthirsty sport. We don't go out and kill everything that we see. You just watched him eat that big bone. Once he's flying loose, he has two choices that I have no control over: come back or fly away. He will only come back if he thinks it's beneficial to him, and that is something that over a period of days, weeks, months, we've had to teach him that yes, we give him the freedom to do what he wants, and if he comes back, it will be worth it.
It's the training of the bird which can send you grey, pull your hair out, but if you get it right and think about what you're doing, the rewards are immense. You create such a bond with the bird. Little pockets like this become rarer and rarer, and so my legacy will be that I hopefully leave it in a better setup, better situation than when I came. That's for somebody else to judge, not for me to say. Not many people would stay in the job I do, for what I do, because they want something more. Just down the road, it's going to offer me a bit more money. Nothing could offer me to make me leave here. Well, not got that many years left, but it's a way of life that I wouldn't give up. I'm lucky to have found it, in fact.
So, good evening. The next film is Bella Ciao, and it's by one of our Film Academy students, Federico Balla, who until last summer was a student at Larkmead. Fred is now studying drama at the Guildford School of Acting, and he's not been able to get a message through to us via video link, so it falls to me to introduce his film. Bella Ciao is a portrait of his mother, who came to live in the UK from Italy some years ago and worked at the European School in Culham. And in this film, she talks about her experiences of coming to live in this country and her excitement and pleasure at being involved in what she describes as a sort of utopia at the European School. Then she talks about how her experience of life here has changed in the last few years. It's a tremendous achievement by Federico, and I hope you'll enjoy it.
Shame on you! Shame on you! Shame on you! Bye-bye you! Bye-bye you! Peace! Traitors!
Where is your representatives? Where is the person mattina mi sono alzato, oh bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, ciao, ciao. Stamattina mi sono alzato e ho trovato l'invaso, oh partigiano.
I grew up in Rome, in a suburb area, very green. There were very poor, very disadvantaged people, and very rich people. My family was a very, very simple family, very standard Italian family. They were very conservative, as the Italian that period, very linked to the church. My father had a lot of dreams and he wanted to visit the world, but he couldn't because my mother was more conservative. She didn't want to leave her comfort zone. I would have liked to be in a more educated family, could understand me better. We are now in 1977, and in Italy, these years around were there were a lot of fights between politics wings, right and left.
Venerdì 12 dicembre 1969, una data che ricorderemo per sempre. Orrore e sdegno, sono questi i sentimenti che dominano tutti gli...
I met friends who were involved in the left-wing politics, and I were very, very active in this. I really believe that I wanted to change the world. We, as left-wing, felt that Italian laws, Italian history was too much controlled by the United States and by private interests of big capitalistic group in Italy, big companies.
Se benché siamo donne, paura non abbiamo per amor dei nostri figli.
I was 14. I told my parents I want to go to the demonstration, and they were quite scared about, but they didn't tell me no, don't go.
In Lega ci mettiamo, olio, olio, là, e la Lega crescerà, per altri socialisti, per altri socialisti, olio, olio, là.
So I was in the first line with other girls shouting against the police. I was quite uncomfortable, but it was everything so new for me. I was curious. When we arrived in Piazza di Spagna, and a lot of police putting the helmet on the head, taking the buttons, and everybody was preparing for an attack. So we were so scared that we started running in Via Condotti very, very quickly, but there wasn't any reason because nobody was watching us. There were years demanding in a way, but also vigorating. I was happy to live that period.
Oh bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, 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 partigiano, portami via, che mi sento di morire. E se io muoio da partigiano.
So I couldn't speak English. The weather was awful, and I didn't know anyone. So it was very, very sad. The first day and the first month, almost the same. The school where I arrived was an amazing school. So it's a small Europe in the same place. So I realized, despite the weather, despite the the language at that moment, I realized that that place was the place I was looking for me and for my children. During the all 8 years I spent here at the European school, I thought this is my paradise. Actually, when I arrived every summer driving from Rome, I arrived in the boat to see Dover, and I really felt at home. I said every time I arrived, I say, now finally I'm at home.
Via! Quasi, non era cosa. Adesso
Now I'm feeling different because I'm following the news about Brexit.
My mother and father signed up to a common market, not to a political union, not to flags, anthems, presidents, and now you even want your own army.
And I have this feeling that I'm not accepted. Io credo che l'Inghilterra nell'immaginario di tanti giovani è proprio il luogo dove poter trovare delle opportunità. Questo fa sì che ai miei occhi la Gran Bretagna sia un paese favoloso, perché ha dato fino adesso opportunità a giovani che non hanno trovato opportunità in altri o nel proprio paese di esprimersi. Secondo me è un tornare indietro, perché chiudersi è sempre un segno negativo e di regressione. Io veramente nel mio immaginario pensare la Gran Bretagna come separata dall'Europa fa sì che, da che mi sembrava un paese meraviglioso e grande nella sua capacità di accogliere, nel mio immaginario diventa una piccola isola. A few days ago I went to the hospital. For the first time they asked me if I have been living here for more than 1 year. I say yes, of course. But with this question, se non fossi stata qui da più di 1 anno, cosa mi sarebbe successo? Ho cominciato a sentirmi in una condizione, in uno stato d'animo quasi di inferiorità. I spent so much time in being in touch with this country, in loving this country, and now I'm losing my interest. I'm not interested anymore in living here if I have to prove every time that I have the same rights of somebody else.
Oh bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, ciao, ciao. Stamattina mi sono alzato e ho trovato l'invaso. Oh partigiano, portami via. Oh bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, ciao, ciao. Partigiano, portami via, che mi sento di morire. E se io muoio da partigiano, oh bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, ciao, ciao. E se muoio da partigiano, tu mi devi seppellire e seppellire lassù in montagna. Oh bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, ciao, ciao.
Hello, my name is James McRae and this is my film, My Job to Be There. After making a film about another military endeavour last year, I decided I wanted to stick with the theme of work in the army, more specifically my dad's job in bomb disposal. The film was originally supposed to document his work and how he rose through the ranks in the army and got to where he is today. Unfortunately though, due to his job taking him to Baghdad and the year that has been 2020, I was unable to get the footage I needed for it. This then led us to decide on making the film about his job and the effects it had on the other people. So my mother generously decided to step up and be an interviewee for the film. Through making this film, I've learned more about my family's history, like my father's job, and how much of it wouldn't be possible without the love and support from my mother. I'm sure he won't mind me saying that without her, he would be completely useless. I mean, I know Mum would agree with me there. I'd like to thank my parents for agreeing to the interviews and for being very professional, even though they were being interviewed by their son. Thanks a lot there. I'd also like to thank Duncan Pickstock for all the time he gave up on Zoom calls helping me with the editing and with the filming of it all. And I'd like to thank Jeremy Taylor for taking the equipment to my house, basically. Usually would have picked it up from school, but not there. Please enjoy the film.
Okay, so I met Adam through a friend I lived with at university, and she introduced us saying, you know, you both want to join the army, you should get to know each other, and we did. So I joined the CCF at school, absolutely loved it, threw myself into everything because I wanted to be the first female head of contingent of the CCF at school. Went to university, joined the OTC, the Officer Training Corps, and then I went to Sandhurst and joined the Army, Officer Training, 11 months. We were the first course to go through where the girls did the same course as the men, so we were in a mixed company for the first time ever. I think I was very independent and focused on what I wanted because Mum brought us up, basically, and she did everything. She worked full-time from me as the youngest being 9. She'd worked part-time before that. She did the gardening, the cooking, the cleaning. So I think probably Mum inspired me to be really independent.
I'm sure it wouldn't. I can do about what I did. That's probably a good thing. How about that?
Yeah, what's it like there today?
It's a nice 46 degrees. Not too humid, but temperature's still going up, which surprised me because I actually thought as we hit September we would start to see the temperature drop, but it's roasting out there at the moment. So the air conditioning is really quite pleasant. Joining the army was probably something that came to me as I grew up. I grew up in a military household. My father was in the military, my grandfather was in the military. We lived in army houses. Always remember my father going off to work in uniform. And I suppose the path to making the decision really started there. And I went to Sandhurst to start my military training. I made the decision that I wanted to bomb disposal, and I applied to take the course.
When Adam started training to do bomb disposal, both of us had had the same first posting in the army, and that was at one of the army's ammunition depots where the ammunition technicians and ammunition technical officers were all trained. So we were both immersed in that environment where pretty much everybody wanted to train to work as bomb disposal. And as a very junior officer, everybody else there was a couple of ranks more senior to him, and they were his heroes.
So life undergoing bomb disposal training was interesting. I suppose if you look back, it was before I had children. I was newly married, and actually I got married just before starting the bomb disposal course. We were given advice like things like get a mortgage before you pass the course, having done bomb disposal, because your life insurance will be more expensive. And I suppose it was at that point did you realise that things were changing. And especially when you're younger, without children, you think you're bomb-proof, you can do things you probably would never do when you really thought about it hard. So actually, it felt normal, but actually, when you think back, it probably wasn't normal.
So I remember distinctly, I found out I was pregnant with James, our first son, when I was on exercise in America. And we were sitting in a restaurant in Washington talking about what the future was going to bring now I'd found out I was pregnant. And I wanted to stay in the army. But then we started to talk about what our life was like in the army. And I was also very strong that somebody had to be there to put the children to bed every night, and that it should be us and not a live-in nanny. I think that's when it started to dawn that the right thing to do for us as a family, with both of us in, was for one of us to leave. The reason I left the army when we had children and not Adam was quite simply he was older than me, he was more senior to me, and therefore he earned more money than me. We're going to have to tackle
How was the garden anyway?
It's looking good. We're going to have to tackle that root though. There's a root where I want to put one of the edging stones. So
well, set Robert with the mattock on it. That's perfect mattock tools.
Yeah, we might do. We might cut it out with a saw. I'm not sure yet. It depends.
Well, you've got plenty of saws in the garage.
Yeah.
You're perfectly adept at that. Once you suddenly have children, it does change. You suddenly have more responsibilities. And I think anyone who said they walked down to a device and didn't think about their children beforehand, well, I think they wouldn't be telling you the truth. All these things go through your head as you're getting into your bomb disposal suit and you're preparing to walk down to the device. These things are starting to go into your head. When you start the walk, though, you've got to be focused and only think about that. So it does change, and you aren't bomb-proof. And I probably wouldn't do things that I did as a youngster. Now I've got children.
I think the most scared I've been of anything Adam's done was when he went to Iraq for the first time on a recce, and he wasn't actually doing bomb disposal then. And his first 2-week recce into Iraq left me in bits. The children were too young to know about it. We were living in Germany. We'd only just moved to the new house, so I didn't really know everyone around me very well. And just sitting for hours and hours alone in the evenings and not knowing what he was going through, when Iraq was probably at its highest for the number of casualties the Brits were having, I found really, really difficult. I can remember talking to him on the phone, and I could hear the siren in the background because they were undergoing a rocket attack. Worrying, he quite rightly said he'd had to go and put the phone down. And we were very nervous, but give that a couple of weeks later and it becomes normality. When the boys were little, it was quite easy to put their minds at ease about what was going on. They were too young really to watch the news at that point. I think they've been more concerned with recent tours that he's done, his current one in particular. Are you dressing up and putting your kit on, or are you just going like, well, do you always dress up to go out?
No, generally, if I go out in the green zone, I go like this. If I go outside the green zone, it's helmet and body armour and everything else. But I'm not going smart, if that's what you mean.
So the communication we have during a tour makes a huge difference to how it is when Adam comes home. When we were both young and living in a mess before we were married, we would be able to use a military phone from our rooms to talk to each other. But some of his other tours, when it was sort of 20 minutes once a week, if you were lucky, over a sat phone and things, that made life really difficult to maintain a normal sort of relationship, I suppose. And when he came home, it would take probably 2 or 3 months for us to get back to normal. And it would be quite difficult because I'd been very much used to doing everything. And suddenly we both had to understand that someone else had to be in on the decision. Or, you know, I can fix the lawnmower and clean whatever, but I had to let him do it because it was his job to do those things when he was back. But more recently, with changes and Wi-Fi and all of those things, we've been able to speak almost every day. And when he comes home, he almost just slots straight back in because he's chatting to us all and he knows what we're all up to. He dealt with every death they had in theatre. Every name mattered to him. And obviously, being specialist bomb disposal, there were a number of fatalities.
Problem with our jobs, things do go wrong. And sadly, I've lost friends, colleagues, people who've worked for me. One of my young captains who died in Afghanistan did an amazing job, but she missed one device. She'd found 2 in a very small area, but didn't find a third. And she stood on it and she died.
So for me, it was really difficult because I was away on a school trip, so I couldn't be here for him, which, through all of this, is my job to be there to look after him. And I know he's a big softie. So it was very difficult.
Some very famous psychiatrists looked at bravery or stress as a pint pot, and you either can lose it in one single incident, some serious incident, or over a number of incidents where just taking that little bit of beer or liquid out of that pint pot, and at some point that pint pot is going to be empty. So we've all got a bit of PTSD. I don't think anyone in what I do, in the profession that I do, who isn't affected by it. And the good thing about being in a peer group of bomb disposal experts is we understand that. We understand what people are going through. And we work as a team and we work together, and we're a very close-knit group of individuals. And we're there to support each other. So I've started a charity several years ago to help bomb disposal operators deal with the stress of doing the job, because actually what we do on a day-to-day basis isn't normal, and it does affect people. You know, a bomb is an indiscriminate killer, men, women, children, so my job is there to save life.
My name's Johnny Willis-Bund, and about a year ago I set out to make a film about bookshops. Now, in the course of making that film, I experienced a few challenges, such as not having a tripod or a nationwide lockdown. But I'd like to think that in the face of adversity, my creativity shone through. Now, whether you like this film or not, I think we can all admit that it's something a bit different, and I would like to especially thank all of the AFU tutors, namely Matt Copson and Mr. Taylor, without whom this film would not have been made. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy it.
My name's Rachel Phipps, and this is the Woodstock Bookshop, which is in Woodstock. I had always wanted to have my own bookshop. My first job while I was at school and after leaving school was in a bookshop. It used to be a very good bookshop in Burford, near the top of the hill, run by a very eccentric woman who just knew everything about books. And so I always wanted to do it, but somehow it wasn't really very compatible with children. And I thought that teaching would be better. But I'd never stopped wanting to have a bookshop, and I was about to have my 50th birthday, and I just thought, well, if I don't do this now, I'm never going to do it. So I did it. If you run your own bookshop, everybody expects that you have read all the books or know everything about all the books, and that is clearly impossible. It's a bit as if you were in a class that you hadn't prepared for properly. I wanted it to be a shop for everyone. I wanted it to be.
I was beginning the process of editing the film when I hit a slight wall. The entire country had gone into lockdown due to a worldwide pandemic, and this left me with no access to any of my footage. The situation dwarfed any others I'd experienced in my life, yet I still felt a need to get the film done. I was up against a deadline, if nothing else. At first, I started noticing my surroundings more. The beauty of my surroundings made me appreciate that lockdown was a lot easier for me than many other people. This, in itself, was something of a blessing, as I could surround myself with greater detail than I had before. I then turned my attention to the books that the film was supposed to be about. Hundreds of titles, sitting in boxes gathering dust. Art and literature do matter. They have undeniable cultural meaning. Meanings that can range from playful to divine. But where does the meaning come from in this art? Is it inherent in the work itself, or does it come from the viewer? If it is inherent, then this should mean that there is a meaning independent of our beholding, some universal intrinsic beauty. But if it is not, is this a demonstration of our ultimate cosmic insignificance? No matter how significant our lives may seem, is it all informed by subjectivity? Perhaps art is the mediator between these two ideas. Literature, cinema, painting, sculpture, architecture, music are all windows from hubris to introspection, an essential role that crosses every single civilization. But has anyone, from Immanuel Kant to Charlie Kaufman, truly discovered any meaning? Well, perhaps the best way to find this out would be to tell a story of our own. One not divinely inspired, nor postmodern in nature. More reminiscent of a gentle walk or night sky. At some point in the distant future, or perhaps long ago, you meet a man, a traveller from an antique land, if you will. He carries his bag of his few worldly possessions towards the edge of the earth. A place with few absolutes and little certainty, where no thing exists until observed. A place where atemporality and impermanence are the norm. Yet in spite of all of this, the traveller persisted on his journey. In his pocket he took with him his written recording of his journey, verbatim conversations with passers-by, such as yourself. For there was one institution which he knew he could find amid the uncertainty, standing solid among the rubble of the ends of the earth. A direct refutation of this destruction of identity, a symbol for the civilizational necessity of art. For you know, before he tells you exactly where he is going, the bookshop at the end of the world.
That's it for this evening. Thank you for joining us. We hope you can do so again for our last screening of the year on Monday the 7th of December. But for now, on behalf of all our filmmakers, thank you and good night.